Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webcast. We are looking at the state of AI. I am Jamie Bykov-Brett. I am a AI and digital transformation specialist, supporting organizations essentially to be able to adopt AI very much through a human-centric lens, though. How do we make sure that AI is augmenting human capability? How do we making sure that we're getting the most out of it? And how do we make sure that it serves both socially acceptable and human-centric needs? So the whole point of these webinars is essentially being able to go, what is the state of AI? We do one every fortnight to be able to look at the changes that are happening. This came about because basically every time that I would go on a podcast or someone else's webinar, they would say, how do I keep up with this information? And the whole point of being able to do these kind of talks is to deliver it to you in a short spell without you having to follow news feeds all the time and be as hyper fixated on everything as I am. So hopefully this gives you a good way of being able to digest that information. We do have comments open as well. So if you're on any other platforms and you want to be able to ask a question, leave a comment, then we're more than happy to answer as we go through, and obviously see what kind of picks up as we go on. If you want to drop a comment where you are, where you're from, what kind of work you're doing, then that's amazing as well. So the way that we structure this is, first of all, we're going to look at the big headline moves. What is the piece of information that you need to know to stay in the loop? We're also going to look at what's moved. And what we mean by that is, what shifts are we seeing within the AI space, and how is that affecting the day-to-day work of everyone? Then we're going to go into the skills gap, and essentially this is helping you understand how the skills are changing, what information you need in order to be able to stay at the forefront of things, and how it might be impacting your organization. This isn't always about technical. This is often more about the development of the other skills that go around AI, because the whole point of AI is in many ways it erodes the technical skills that you need in order to be able to operate technology. So we look at a balanced way of looking at that skills gap. We're also going to be looking at risks, regulations. So if there's anything that has changed in terms of what people are regulating for, what information your organization needs from a governance perspective, and then essentially 3 questions that you should be asking if you are a leader in an organization. What are the 3 questions that you should be looking for this fortnight? So let's jump in. We're going to start with our headline. So I suppose it's not necessarily the biggest new headline that's out there, but we're really starting to see the impact of the cost of AI data centers in terms of memory and storage. So if you're looking at the way that this is going at the moment, there's 3 major companies that basically fund all of the AI memory that you start to see. So this is Micron, Samsung, and there's another one as well that I can't remember off the top of my head. But essentially, if you're looking at some of the margins that they're making at the moment, they've gone from 3% to 87%. Samsung has quadrupled its value within the last few quarters. It is looking, all of these organizations are making more than $1 trillion this year alone. What you're starting to see is the impact of that on the cost of consumer electronics, because it's not like what's going into data centers is different technology than what gets put in your smartphone, what gets put in your computer. RAM, memory, all of this kind of stuff all happens. It's the same places that you're all buying it from. And the difference is the data center is willing to pay a lot more for it than you and I are. So what you're starting to see, that is the impact on that on consumer prices. So things like Macs have gone up by $300, iPad's gone up by $100, Xbox has gone up by a significant amount as well. So you're going to see that over the next few years, and you're going to see that as part of the changing patterns up until probably 2028. So expect changes in that space. What's moved? So what you're seeing is it's not just Microsoft that are doing this now, but both OpenAI and Anthropic have all announced teams within the last 6 weeks, which is basically implementation teams. And this is what I do. This is what I've been doing since day one when it's come to AI. Is I think these organizations are beginning to realize it as well now. It's not just about the technology. Change isn't about just technology. Change has a huge human component to it. And if you're utilizing a new technology, you might have access to AI, but if you don't know how to be able to apply that within your organization, it's just another tool that sits there and people use half a dozen times within the year for when they need to rewrite an email. And that's not the scale of the digital transformation that we're talking about. So what you're seeing is organizations like Anthropic, like OpenAI, like Microsoft, are now investing lots of money into sending consultants into organizations, surprisingly the kind of thing that I do, into being able to help with that adoption piece. Because it's not just about training, it is about delivering pilots, it is about people experimenting, learning, feeling confident with the new technology. I often talk about with organizations as well, they expect to see AI come into the organization and then this immediate productivity gain. And anytime you implement any technical system, actually what you normally see is decline in productivity before you see gains in it. And that's because if you're trying to hit the same targets that you were the year before, you implement something new, you've thrown people off the way that they are used to working, the way that they are confident working. And that creates two situations. One is that people then stop trying to use the technology because they're like, I've got to hit this target, I'm going to do it the way that I know. Or they start using the technology and they see a productivity dip, and then people go, why are you not doing as well as you were doing last year? So this is where implementation is a massive part of the AI conversation, and something that your organization needs to be looking at beyond just, we gave everyone some AI training. Second big move that we see here is government signing off on AI models, particularly in the States. You've seen this with Anthropic and their Fable model. You're also seeing it with OpenAI and GPT 5.6. What's happening is, because these models are much more capable, they are gaining in what they're able to do and the security risks that come along with them. What you're beginning to see is more regulation that's happening around it. So the States really started off as this kind of, we're not going to regulate anything, we want to promote innovation and we want to be able to make sure that everyone has access to this technological capability. And now all of a sudden they're looking at it and being like, that could be a bit of a threat, that could be a bit of a risk. So now we're starting to see this kind of regulation aspect that's coming in, which I actually think at some point Trump put in a piece, an executive order that says that they weren't going to regulate AI for a certain amount of time. I think it was in the Big Beautiful Bill. So it's amazing how things change so quickly when the rate of technology changes as well. So one thing I would also add to that, if you're an organization, one thing you want to think about is design for portability in mind, that you don't have to rely on one model or one provider. If you're building systems that utilize AI, you want to be able to know that if you need to swap models or swap providers tomorrow, that you can do it. And one of the big things that's happening within the EU at the moment is they are looking at that data sovereignty. They are going, wait a second, if the States wants to press a big red button and turn us off from this model or this payment or whatever it might be tomorrow, what are we going to do about it? And now they're starting to invest in, well, actually, we need these sovereign systems. We need them based in our own countries. We need them regulated in the way that we see fit. Because, yes, it could just be a case of a big red button. And what you have today might not be what you have tomorrow. And obviously, that could be very costly for a lot of businesses. So you're beginning to see a shift there. We're beginning to see a correction on the AI layoffs. You'll remember, particularly beginning of this year and end of last year, lots of organizations going, AI, we're going to have to lay a lot of people off. It just happens to be around about our shareholder meetings and stuff like that. No, we're going to replace these teams with AI, particularly in customer service and stuff like that. And now what you're beginning to see is a mass hiring of people coming back. One of the reasons for that is that they fundamentally misunderstand how AI works. And one of the things they fundamentally misunderstand is AI for most people's roles, where it's actually able to enhance what people are doing. It augments human capability, and therefore it needs a human operator. I can give an example from my business. I have 28 AI agents that run my business. Then they sit in the background, they do things at the wee hours of the morning, and I get those reports. And one of the things that I was finding is like, oh, I can generate all of this data, all of this information really quickly. I can do a website audit. I can make sure that we have all the privacy settings. I can send out all the AI agents to do it. But as a single human being, I can't process all of the things that I can get them to do. And in fact, I've had to design AI governance structures around AI agents that manage AI agents in order to be able to process all of that information and send me voice notes every day with just the updates that I need to be able to have and the information that I need to consume. Ultimately, AI works best in partnership with a human component there. It's also important remembering that an AI can never be held accountable, so it should never be making a management decision. AIs sit within that space that accountability sits with human beings, and therefore you need human in the loop of everything that you're doing. These things do not just work autonomously as people might like to think that they do. So the human component is really important. Which leads me very nicely onto our other mover, which is a lot of people are saving time with AI, but one of the hidden taxes that we're seeing of that is that people are babysitting AI as well. And we call it bot sitting, where essentially, yes, you can get an AI to generate something really quickly and you can get it to do all this information, but ultimately you still have to have someone at the end of it who's going to check through that information, realizes something's wrong, that it's hallucinated, or that something needs to be done differently. So although there's productivity gains being gained from implementing AI, what you are finding is that there is productivity loss from having to do bot sitting as well. And that will change over time. Like the amount of bot sitting that is needed is going to shift. And it also, the better you are at being able to utilize these technologies, the less bot sitting you find yourself having to do. But at the moment, it's very much a trade-off of productivity gains, but bot sitting is the payoff in return. So it's not always hitting people with the productivity that they're looking for. So skills gaps for the moment. What are we seeing? What are the capabilities that have shifted since in the last fortnight or over the last few months? Ties in nicely to our conversation around human judgment, but judgment is really the constraint now. If you can build anything that you can imagine on demand, anytime, any device, anywhere for a fraction of the cost, you are able to make these decisions, get information, get the research all sorted. The real part here is the human component that's there. And that's the judgment that you have as a human being to be able to make good decisions. This is where experience really comes in as well. You have to remember that an AI has no subjective experiences. It doesn't have judgment. It produces a statistically probable outcome based on the input that it's given. So what you're going to see is that human judgment becomes much, much more important. And although you're seeing a lot of developers, like we said at the beginning of the year, that were being made redundant, actually that experience that people have, that understanding, means that they are able to get the best out of the technology, which means that that's the reason people are having to hire them back, because someone on your team has the knowledge of every failed change project your organization has undergone. They understand that, they understand why they happened, and AI doesn't have that information. And that's where you need that human judgment to be able to essentially help in being able to get with that wider participation from your AIs to be able to really kind of achieve the results that you're looking for. So it used to be that you would decide what you want to build. You'd probably go to your engineering team, your technical teams, and go, we've got this use case. We want you to go and build that. That's 2024. We are looking at now where you can go, well, actually, being able to build a pilot or a minimum viable product to be able to create something really quickly, that's dead easy to be able to do. I built an app on my phone to be able to help me with my recovery for my broken leg. It took me less than an hour to be able to do, and it monitors all of my recovery, food that I'm eating, training plans, workshop sessions, even threw in a bit of Lithuanian language learning on top of that. All of that was built within the space of an hour. That's the easy part. That's the cheap part. Ideas are cheap. What happens is you go, okay, now we've built it. Now we're going to decide and review it. Did this pilot work? Did it achieve the outcomes? Was this what we were looking for? And what do we need to be able to go and do differently? And that is where you're starting to see a shift within the worlds that we're looking in. So I always talk about the difference between change and transition. And change is a plan. You can map out all the events of change into step-by-steps, do this, do that, do that, do that. Transition does not follow the timeline of people's change curve, okay? You don't get to just put in all these change events and decide that people are going to psychologically go through that process of change and transition on your schedule. And I've been having a lot of conversations about this with people at the moment, because quite often you'll go to an organization and they'll go, we just need a training intervention. We're just going to do some training and that's going to be fine. And training is a really useful intervention, but it's only useful when you hit it at the right part of that change curve. For those of you who might not have come across the change curve before, it's a model by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. You might have actually seen it through much more grim names like the 5 stages of death or the 7 stages of death. Essentially, she was studying the psychological process that people go through when they're coming to the acceptance of their demise, and also the process that other people go through when they're going through that. And actually, what she found out that she was mapping was, this is how the human beings deal with any kind of change. This is the human psychological process of change and transition. And what you probably saw, and you probably notice it more and more when you're looking at the conversations you have with people, quite often you get shock and denial. So the first thing people will say is, oh my God, I can't believe they're thinking of implementing it here. We're not the right organization to implement AI. It's never going to be able to do what I do. I'm really good at what I do, and AI will never be able to replicate that. Shock, denial. And there is part of that which might be true, might not be. But what you're going to see is there's kind of this almost a bit of a productivity boost in order to be able to kind of go through a denial phase. You have to prove that you're better than what's coming in. And leaders go through this process as well. It doesn't always have to be about the implementation of a new technology. When I'm looking at where leaders, particularly those that have made redundancies recently, and particularly blamed it or attributed it to AI, I think blamed is probably a bit of a loaded terminology there. What you're seeing is they went through they've gone, oh yeah, we've made these layoffs because AI is going to be able to do the job. Then they've started to see that implementation and they've gone through a denial phase of being like, no, we can definitely use AI to do this. Like, we don't need to increase head count. We're not going to need that human component with what we do. And then as they've come to the acceptance that actually that's not possible, it's not, the technology either doesn't serve in the way they help, or they haven't implemented it properly, or they haven't dealt with that transition within their organization. Now they're falling into their depression valley, which is essentially a part where they've come, oh, I've had to accept that this is the reality for now, for where we're at as an organization. This hasn't been implemented very well. The transition hasn't happened as smoothly as we hope. We actually do need to come to some degree of acceptance. And this is the point that they're hiring people back now, because they've gone through their shock and denial phases. They've gone through their frustration, and now they're going into this depression aspect. And you're going to see this throughout all of the process that you're going through an AI transition. And this is where you have to look at it as a digital transformation project. This isn't just a technological implementation. This is a much broader piece of work that is going to change the shape of how your organization operates. And one of the things that I want you to be mindful of is going, actually, a training intervention at the beginning of the journey might not be the right call for us. We have to have a lot more acceptance and understanding and consulting in order to get to the place where a training intervention will help us. You know, pilots, they don't help you at the denial stage. The pilots help you at the experimenting phase. You have all these different types of interventions that work really well. And it's about picking the right ones depending on where your organization's at and what you're trying to do. And that's where I think a lot of organizations need a lot of help. And this is why you're seeing the big investments from Microsoft, ChatGPT, OpenAI in being able to support with that implementation rather than just being able to do the technology part. If you want a bit more support on being able to do that, we have a helpful guide that's there. You can scan the QR code. Basically, it helps you get started with AI implementation. So something you might want to check out as well. As I said, if you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to add them into what we're talking about, and we'll do our best to answer them as we come through. So engineering, the token bill. There's particularly if you were looking at the end of 2025, people going, AI is going to be so much cheaper than having a human being being able to do that. And what a lot of organizations are realizing very quickly is there is a cost attached to being able to run AI. Computers got more expensive. We looked at the beginning of this at being able to see our manufacturers that are making a lot of money from the increase in AI data centers and stuff like that, because there's such a demand for compute at the moment. And therefore, there's a cost that's attached to that. And that cost is what your agents operate in. You get paid a salary, your agents get paid to compute. And compute also has a financial part attached to it. So one thing you're going to need to think about is what balancing up those costs of the human component of the work you're doing and the AI part of the component that you're doing. And also recognizing that a lot of this is when you're utilizing other people's models. If you're an organization, you're probably utilizing a cloud provider. You're going through an API or you're using something like Copilot. You're utilizing somebody's models and able to be able to go and do that. But if you're looking on individual usage, honestly, a standard laptop nowadays can run AI models. And if you're only utilizing AI for things like rewriting your emails or coming up with a proposal, I can guarantee you do not need these frontier models. You need those if you're utilizing much more advanced tasks like coding and stuff like that. One thing that I noticed a lot when Fable came out as a model is lots of people reaching out to me going like, can't really see the difference between this and Opus. And I go, you're not going to see the difference between it because the whole point of Fable is it's designed for agentic coding. It's designed for tasks that would normally take you 3 or 4 days worth of development to deliver on. And instead it's being able to do that in a matter of, it might have taken you a few days, but it's doing it in a matter of hours, but it's a much more long completion of that task. Rather than just being able to write back to you. And that's because most people at the moment, they're still utilizing AI with that chatbot interface. You go into ChatGPT, you type in what you want, and you get an answer back. That's very 2025. What you're seeing at the moment is the real values that come from AI, the real gains that you're seeing in these advancements in models is in the developer space. Those who are able to have more of a technical understanding to be able to utilize it to build products, services, things like that. So yeah, there's a human cost. There's an AI cost to this, and there's a human cost to this. And you're going to be wanting to look at the differences of what you need in order to achieve what you want. So some things can be agent-led. Some things, if it's repetitive, involves a lot of text, you could teach an intern to do it. You could probably get an AI to be able to go and do that. Developer and agent is going to be a case of we need both components. You're utilizing the strength of human thinking and the speed of AI thinking in order to get results. And then there's going to be some bits that are going to be developer only. This is where you're going to be wanting to be able to, reword my email, create this proposal, that kind of stuff. You don't need to have the most advanced models to do that. I've got a question there in the chat from Chad. I'll bring it up on our display here, which is, do you see the parallels between AI and cloud digital transformations that the industry and businesses and cultures can take advantage of from a lessons learned perspective as it relates to cost controls, IT, cybersecurity? I mean, when it comes, I'm going to keep that so I can keep reading through. AI does sit in cloud infrastructure, and there's obviously a transformation that went place to be able to go and put things into cloud infrastructure. And obviously AI utilizes the same infrastructure as well. So there's always learnings to be able to be had there. As we often say, history doesn't necessarily repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And one of the things that you're going to see from an AI perspective is the cost, that the realization of those costs and the extent of those costs probably won't come in the first pitch deck. What you get sent on your first try is not going to necessarily be what it ends up as. I also think there's a lot around security that people need to be put in place. People are very security conscious in the cloud digitization side of being able to do things. And you need to have that security around it, because a lot of the time when you're utilizing these cloud platforms, most people aren't reading through the vendor agreements and the privacy agreements and stuff like that. And I can guarantee you, most of you would not be comfortable with the kind of things that are actually in those agreements that you have with vendors about how that data can be utilized and stuff like that. And when it comes to an AI perspective, you have that in even greater amounts, because the security that you can have on it could be even less secure, particularly as these things get more complex. So I would say anything that you did from a cloud transformation perspective, it depends on the organization. It depends on how that digital shift went for you. But you'll definitely find learnings within it. I think from my point of view, it's about governance. It's about cybersecurity. It's about making sure that you have pilots and understanding and people who are upskilled in those areas within your organization, and that sharing of knowledge within the organization as well. If you're looking at transformation, you've got to bring everybody on the journey. Thank you, Chad. Thanks for putting that in there. Which leads nicely onto our next section, which is the risk and regulation. So we're starting to see a lot of shifts when it comes to technology. In the UK, a lot is being done around, under the guise of child protection. Maybe well-intentioned within that way, but definitely questionable in terms of the effectiveness of being able to do that. So you're seeing in the UK at the moment, they want to build scanning onto people's phones with no opt-out, which essentially would scan all of your photos, and it would check for any illicit materials or anything like that that could be harmful for children. But obviously with a huge invasion of privacy in being able to do that, it's not necessarily even the most effective method. Apple has tried these kind of things before, and they've often kept the features that have been useful. So they've kept things like security warnings and stuff like that for particularly on children's phones to be able to make sure that that doesn't happen as much. But we're seeing this kind of are we protecting children, or is there a scope creep here? Is this really going to be to the benefit of what we're trying to achieve, or does it actually push it underground? I would say when we're looking at the UK at the moment, if you look at the people that are actually catching predators, that are actually looking after children within these spaces, they have a black backlog of people that they have as targets that need to be able to go under investigation. The problem is they don't have the resources to go and prosecute, to be able to go and do things to essentially stop those kind of things happening. So having the technology on the phone might be one part of an equation, but actually the funding for those organizations, much more important. And I feel sometimes, particularly with the UK government at the moment, they're going for quick wins over tangible results. And that's concerning, particularly when it comes to technology, because it might be being utilized in a meaningful way for one government, but another government comes in and that same technology exists on the phones, puts people in potentially even more compromising situations. Because I think it's Mon Mothma in Star Wars who goes, "I fear your definition of wrong," because it depends on who's in power and what they're saying. So definitely something to be mindful of. I think we all want to be we all want to be able to protect children. We all want to stop the digital harms that are there. But I do get the sense that a lot of governments at the moment are very technically illiterate, and they're not understanding the extent of these technologies, nor are they funding the people who can actually go and support. So fund the organizations and institutions that are doing the work, not just the technology solutions. You're seeing a big shift at the moment in Europe. I said at the beginning of this, of Europe moving away from US-centric technology. A good example of this is with Palantir at the moment. 5 big European companies are all either banning or ending contracts with Palantir. They're looking for sovereign infrastructure. And you can see this within the AI Act as well. Being able to be accountable and have that traceability of how AI is being utilized, where it's being utilized, that is a much more prominent factor in people's decision making. And if you operate in the EU, that's going to be essential. I can see a lovely comment there from Chad on the previous bit. Makes sense. Thank you very much for your question, Chad. So I'll share a bit of an anecdote, actually. I had recently somebody reached out on LinkedIn. I do a lot of freelance work, so this isn't an unusual occurrence. Saying, "Hey, we might have some work for you. Let's jump on a call and we'll go and talk about it." And as I've jumped on that call, through a lot of social engineering, it starts off with, we start having a conversation, and then they go, "Oh, my camera's not working. Can we jump on to turn cameras off so I can hear you better? Oh, actually, my computer's broken at the moment. That's why the camera's not working. I'm on my tablet. Can you share your screen rather than I'm sharing my screen?" So I go, "Okay, yeah." Bit confused, but working with it. And then like, "Actually, can you just go and download this thing from our GitHub so I can show you the work that we're working on?" And I'm like, this is getting suspicious for me now. This is going into the realms of definitely not being comfortable with what's going on. So I basically open up that link, but I open up in Sandbox, which essentially protects the rest of my system quite significantly instead of opening in my own system. And what I see straight away is this is malicious software. So there's a social engineering part on there. And what they've tried to do is to try and get me to install a malware called Beavertail, which essentially steals things like all of your cookies, all of your logged in information on Chrome, any passwords you have stored in developer files and stuff like that. Now, I opened up in Sandbox, checked through the system, everything's fine from my perspective, but it goes to show some of the social engineering that is also coming on board with virus protection at the moment. It's not about trying to just attach something to an email anymore. There's a massive social engineering component to it. beaver tail is a hacking technique that's quite often utilized within North Korea. So yeah, I had to deal with North Korean hackers a couple weeks ago. I'm very fortuitous enough that I understood the safety concerns. I had the ways around that, but it was very cleverly socially engineered, and you can completely see where someone could get caught out very quickly. So it's more than just teaching people about don't just open this malicious link now. There's much more security aspects that you should be working on in your teams, because there is valuable information within your organization, and I can guarantee you people are after it. Another one is around ESG, essentially looking after the environmental impact of your business. One of the questions that I have come up quite a lot around is around data center water usage, and really how data centers are operating, and the environmental impact really depends on the region that you're in. If you're looking at the States at the moment, you're looking at being able to do it cheap, fast, and where the rules are weakest. That's where you're seeing data centers come up. They often don't utilize things like purple pipe water systems or environmentally friendly approaches, which there are plenty of, and we've got lots of examples of being able to do that. But instead, they are focusing on being able to, how can we get these up and running as cheaply as possible for the people that are building it, often with the cost being passed on to the people in the neighboring cities and towns and stuff like that, as the power usage goes up and the grid wasn't designed to be able to support these massive infrastructures. Whereas if you look across places like Sweden, you have data centers that heat homes in the winter. They take the excess heat and then pump it through people's houses. There's places that we can develop this in. Purple pipe water uses sewage water to cool data centers, so it doesn't utilize any drinking water. All I can say with this is you have to make it in the countries that you're in. The only legal one to be is the ones with ethical usage. And what you're probably going to find at the moment is the places where those regulations are weakest. It's going to be the places that are most vulnerable to those data centers popping up. Cool. So finally, ending on 3 questions that you should be asking this fortnight in your organizations. With hardware prices climbing up until 2028, are you going to buy now? Are you going to make sure you get the technology you want in before the prices continue to rise, because they will continue to rise? Are you able to utilize what you have for a longer period of time, or do you have the budget in place to work with these rising costs? Every organization should be thinking about this. It's lots of organizations were under pressure to cut head count for AI. What does the rehiring wave tell you as an organization? As I said, the human component here is really important to getting the best out of your AI. Copilot licenses is not a measure of success or productivity or value. Getting the most of humans being able to utilize the technology, that's where the value sits. So if you're under pressure to be able to cut head count, also think about the hidden costs that are coming with that. The costs of compute, the costs of the technology. These are all very tangible things. Make sure that if you're under pressure for that kind of stuff, you need to be able to understand that, so you can talk to the organizations and the people that are putting pressure on you. Another question you should be asking: if your vendor access, architecture, or jurisdiction was to change overnight, what's your exit plan? Can you switch in one vendor for another vendor? Are you able to go and utilize other sources being able to do this? Do you have a plan B? Hopefully you do. Hopefully that's going to be useful to you. So those are my 3 questions for the next fortnight. If you are looking to be able to learn a little bit more, you want more information, you want more support on being able to do these kind of things, do jump onto the Bykov-Brett website. You'll find every report that we do for these fortnightly reviews goes into our report section. You can get to do that by going to the Learning Lab, go to Metropolitan Academy. Anything that you need to get started with AI is available for free here. The whole point is I want to build the community. I want to make sure people feel supported on the journey that they're going through. So we have blog articles, guides, videos, newsletter, lives like today, like some GitHub resources as well. If you're looking for projects, if you're looking for support and being able to do things, free assessments, also a catalog of any courses or information you want that we don't deliver but might be delivered by elsewhere. So I think we have 498 courses, almost up to 500 there, of all of the AI support that you might want to learn, and it gives you a list of whether they're free, whether they cost, all of that kind of stuff. So lots of resources there to be able to get you started. Highly recommend you can join the newsletter. Everything that we can do to support is in there, and be part of that community. And also, if you're looking for support within your organization, you're looking to be able to learn more, you're looking to train people, support people, understand that change journey, then do reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn, Jamie Bykov-Brett. My handle's the same on everything. Love to be able to kind of talk to you and see if there's anything we can do to support your organization. So thank you for joining today. Really appreciate your time, energy, effort, questions. If anyone needs anything else from me, then do not hesitate to let me know. And if not, I will catch you in a fortnight. We also have a webinar next Thursday, which is where we do vibe coding live. So you can start to see the agent capabilities that are being developed in AI rather than just how do I get a better answer from a prompt. So if that's something of interest to you, then join us on Thursday. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll speak to you all very, very soon.